Welcome to Prosecco and Prose, episode 30.
This week's Prosecco is Benvolio.
This week's prose is Girl A by Abigail Dean. Thank you for joining us for an episode of Prosecco and Prose. I'm Amy.
And I'm Wendy. We're a deep dive virtual book club.
That's kind of like a quiz-free lit class you never knew you needed.
So let's
Pop a cork for this week's episode of Prosecco and Prose.
For those who are listening in the car, please don't drink and drive.
Save the bubbly for later.
This is it. Our last piece of prose for season 3.
Oh, it's gone so fast.
It has. But really, I feel like this whole year has gone by so fast. I mean, this is the last week of October.
Just 2 months until the holidays.
And your trip to Italy to see your little granddie.
Oh, I can't wait, Wendy. I am just so excited.
I know, you're like radiating.
Can't stand it. You know, tickets are still not over the top yet either. I was really surprised. And then for you, only 3 months until your journey over to the family boot.
I know we are both so excited to get to spend some time with family.
And drink some fancier Prosecco. I can't wait for the Calmo, the Tranquillo.
I mean, let me know if you find some.
I know.
We'll have to stick some in our suitcase.
Absolutely.
But speaking of Prosecco, let's get to our last bottle of bubbly for the season.
Yes, this Benvolio with a pretty blue, simple label. How do we end up matching this thing to Girl A? I was looking at that today, and if we said it, I forgot. I just cannot find any correlation looking at it right now.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it was just our last bottle that we didn't have paired up with anything. So, after our big Prosecco buying spree.
Oh, I know. Or maybe it could have been the lines of the letters on the bottle and maybe on the book. Or maybe we're just saving the best for last.
I hope.
Who knows? Anyway, this is it, guys. Last bottle, last book. Let's see how it goes.
Just for the season, Amy. We already have plans for season 4.
And 5.
Slow your roll. Season 5 is just ideas.
They're exciting. I can't wait.
Now, this one is rated as a 4.0, so lots of others think it's pretty good.
We'll see. I need to give it my, rating and official PSA.
Of course. Your Prosecco Swilling Advisory.
Oh, I was going to tell you, I don't like that. Prosecco Swilling Advisory. It's kind of a mouthful. I fine-tuned that for us.
Should I be scared?
No, it's clean. How about Prosecco Swillability? If you think about the P, the Prosecco, swill, S-A, ability. Prosecco Swill-ability. Prosecco Swillability. It's kind of like a DNF for Prosecco.
It does roll off the tongue. I think you should just get on with it.
Jeez, Miss Pushy Pants.
I've been called worse.
Well, okay, so we've got here, let me just take a look at the bottle. Oh, the writing's small again. Man.
Just hold it further away. That's what I do.
Let's see. Benvolio here. It's a DOC, extra dry. Everything has been extra dry. 11% alcohol. And the tab, I looked at our tab on this one. It was $16, but the average cost is about $13.
Oh.
So, inflation got us on this one.
Oh, well.
Not too bad, though. And it sounds like a good start, 4.0. It's got a good alcohol in it. It's extra dry DOC. Pretty good.
It does.
Maybe we will be going out with a good one this time.
Hope.
I think all the Proseccos this season were DOCs. No top-tier DOCGs.
Actually, all but one were a DOC. Remember the Bellissima? Christy Brinkley's Prosecco?
Oh, yeah. We paired it with Popular Girls. Perfect label match there, right?
Yes.
And now, I do remember, though, not seeing the DOC label on that one. And if I remember correctly, it was labeled as a sparkling white wine. I was all confused on whether it was really Prosecco or not.
Right. And I said something about Glera grapes or something, so it must be a Prosecco.
That's right.
Well, as much as I hate to admit this, I was kind of right and kind of wrong. That's the part I hate to admit.
Really? I am smiling from ear to ear, am I not?
She really is. So listen, zip
she
it.
was wrong for once.
You open and get us poured, and I'll very quickly explain. Calm down.
Oh.
So there's this pyramid of quality. Here you go.
Yeah, thanks.
So there's this pyramid of quality, I guess you could say. The bottom is the DOC. Isn't that the one where you're supposed to eat all your fruits and vegetables or something in the food pyramid?
Sure.
And next up is the DOCG.
Okay.
So the pyramid really refers to a land area. DOC and DOCG are a designation of a controlled region. And, we learned the G just adds a guarantee, right?
Yes.
So there are actually two even higher quality
Here you
types
go.
of Prosecco.
Sorry.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Two better Proseccos? Why are we just now finding out about this?
Because it's very rare to see them here in the States. But you will be in the area. Maybe you can spot us a bottle.
Maybe.
Okay?
I'll check it out.
Yeah. Anyway, the very top tier is Cartese. It's an area about 266 acres.
Cartese. How do you spell that?
Cartizze.
Cartese. Cool.
So it's an area of about 266 acres, harvested all by hand because of the terrain. They just can't get vehicles up there. So obviously that's going to be more costly, right? And is supposedly the most expensive vineyard property in Italy.
Oh, might be a little too highbrow for my taste, though.
And my wallet. So the next level down is Prosecco Superiore Rive, or Rive, I'm trying to roll my R, DOCG.
Okay.
It's an area of about 615 acres. And these things kind of just like water in a stone thrown into water, they ripple out. So you have this tiny one inside and then a little bit bigger out, right? So this labeling requires a tasting before bottling. Then around that area, you have the DOCG region. Around that area, the biggest region, DOC. And Rive is also not something readily available here.
Well, I'll definitely be looking out for that when I visit.
Yes, please
over the holidays. Well, you were busy talking, and I didn't want to interrupt you too much. So I'm going to share with our listeners that this one did not have a lot of mousse on the pour. That big foamy look on the pour. It was very little. So I have a question for you.
Yes.
That Bellissima sparkling wine, so wasn't from these regions? Is that what you're trying to say?
So first, you're right. There's not too many bubbles in the glass on this Benvolio either. And no, to your question, not necessarily. First, the DOC and DOCG labels are not always an indicator of quality. Obviously, like with anything that comes down to individual producer.
Oh, that makes sense. Especially after this season's tastings.
Right. Exactly. And those labels, they just mean that the winemaker is also following the rules and regulations that come with those labels. So if you remember, Bellissima was like an organic. There were some other things. So there's tons of rules and regulations, like the production area, the wine color, like the color of it even.
Right.
Permitted grape varieties. She could have put in another grape that doesn't qualify. Their maximum and minimum proportions of the grape. Like Prosecco has to be 85% Glera grapes.
Right,
so
right. We learned that a couple episodes back.
The styles of wine, the maximum and minimum alcohol levels, and even the permitted or mandated viticulture, vinification, and maturation techniques. So if you're not following the way they want you to cultivate it.
That's just a lot to learn. I just want to drink the stuff.
We're going to get to it. So basically what I'm saying is if they don't meet all these regulations, they don't get the label in a nutshell.
Wow. Had no idea.
Neither did I.
And you look a little exhausted.
I know. I'm ready for some.
I'm ready for some
Prosecco. So, long story short, this Benvolio has apparently met all the rules and regulations for a DOC.
Well, cheers to that. Let's see if it meets our rules.
Well, it's a pretty clear yellow to me.
Oh, I agree. Light straw in color, almost a little lemon yellow. And it doesn't have much of a smell to me at all. Like I'm getting absolutely nothing. Nothing at the moment.
I have to agree. I'm not really either. It would be interesting. I wonder what the permitted color in the regulations is, Maybe we should taste it and see if we get something, because it's almost like a bland, right?
Yeah, there's really nothing. I'm not smelling anything yet. Maybe it just needs to open up a little bit.
Maybe.
Okay, let's see.
I see you swilling.
I was trying to behave this time. If I have some in my glass at the end, or maybe in the middle, I'll do a little PSA. Well, just kind of letting it sit in my mouth. It's got a nice citrusy front. It kind of mingles out to nothingness.
Nothingness? That's an interesting tasting
nothingness.
Note. Now I'm getting a very, very light citrus lemon smell. with just a hint of a salt smell.
Salt? Really? Now, do you taste salt?
No, it's just on the nose and very subtle. I do get citrus initially like you, though, but it's really hard to pick anything else out at the moment. Let's see what happens.
Maybe we're just Prosecco'd out.
No way. I mean, is that possible, you think? What if that happens?
Please, it won't.
I hope not. I really like this stuff.
Okay, let's move on. Let's meet our author, Miss Abigail Dean.
Abigail Dean is an English author, and Girl A is her debut novel, published in January 2021. She worked as a lawyer for 5 years, but realized if she didn't make a change, she might never achieve her dream of writing.
Wow.
Ahead of her 30th birthday, she took the summer of 2018 off and began working on her novel.
Seems like it was a good change. Girl A was an instant Sunday Times bestseller.
I think it paid off for her. I mean, you could say. She is currently working as a lawyer for Google, says she is back to enjoying being a lawyer and working on her second novel, The Conspiracies, which will probably make it to my TBR stack.
Oh, mine too. Now, on her website, Miss Dean had a couple of very interesting articles. One was entitled, A New Obsession, Writing Girl A. This article gave some insight on how she came to write Girl A. It also gave some inspiration for the novel and a little bit of a writing process. If you want to go a little deeper or behind the scenes of the novel, be sure to check that out. I'll link her website on our show notes, but it's super simple. It's abigail-dean.com. But I will put that in our show notes.
That article was very interesting. I also found her other article, The Editing Process, How It Really Works, which was written with her UK editor, Phoebe Morgan, who is also an author. Quite interesting. They talk about what happens once you have sold your manuscript to a publisher. Sounds like a lot of fun and a lot of work. I think I'd like to be on the editing side. Although, I'd also love to be an author. What about you, Amy?
No, I get to be the author. You can be my editor. I mean, you're always keeping me in check, right? You can't say that.
Well, I want. Okay.
I mean, I really do need someone to police me.
At least you know.
Right. I mean, if it weren't for you, Prosecco and Prose would be on the highly censored list.
Facts. But you are the creative one, and that works out very well for me. Works out very well for us, actually.
Oh.
Before you go any further, let's introduce our characters.
Okay. We actually have quite a few in this novel.
Yeah.
But, all are seen through the eyes of our narrator, Lexs, or Alexandria, and known to the public as Girl A. She is the second oldest of the 7 Gracie children.
I think maybe we should just list the others, to not get too confusing. What do you think?
I think so. So we have Ethan, who is boy A and the oldest sibling. Then next is Lex, our girl A, the one who escaped. Then we have Delilah, she's girl B. And then number 4, Evie, she's girl C. Number 5 is Gabriel, boy B. And then Daniel, number 6, who is boy C, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, number 7, Noah, who is boy D. I think I got them all in.
Yeah, I'm really actually impressed because it's kind of a lot of characters, like just listing them that way, obviously. But when you read, it makes sense mostly.
Yes, it does. I did get a bit confused at times, but it all gets figured out in the end.
It does. Sometimes it's close to the end, but all the pieces come together. I know you and I what is the order of these guys, and did we get everybody? Yeah. I mean, I only really struggled with the birth order, as I just said, and that's not really necessary to get sucked into the book, right?
No, I agree. Now, summarizing, this was a bit tricky for us.
Yes.
I said, let's just read the book flap. Wendy's like, no, we don't do that here. Maybe next season.
Maybe. We'll see. But yeah, definitely. And I just don't want to give too much away because Miss Dean does such a great job at revealing the pieces of the story that the puzzle really comes together so well.
And with such a bang.
Yeah.
Wow. Right? Yep. So we're going to do our best to keep the mystery, though our discussion might have a few spoilers.
I mean, it'll very likely have spoilers because I don't think we can discuss some stuff without it.
No, it wouldn't be a full discussion.
Right. But hopefully it'll make you all want to read it anyways.
Right.
Okay. So I'll get started. The story is told from Lex's point of view, as we mentioned, and there are a lot of flashbacks to the past. It can feel a bit all over the place. The story kind of makes your head feel like it's bouncing around, but I think that really just speaks to the mind of our narrator.
Oh, it so does. And her mind is all over the place.
It is. It really is. And I loved it.
I did too.
I loved that
too, especially on my second read.
I mean, it really pulled you into the story, don't you think?
Oh, agree.
You're just trying to follow her. But to our summary, the story is told from Lex's point of view. Each chapter introduces us to another sibling, but only from Lex's eyes. She narrates throughout.
Each long chapter. Oh my God. I'm not complaining, but they were so long. I mean, I'm like a stoplight chapter reader. Just ask James Patterson. He writes the perfect chapter size for me.
Really? I've never read one of his books, so maybe I should.
Yeah. I mean, I can get through it in a stoplight. I might get a honk or two, but I can get through a chapter.
Oh, you mean like waiting at a stoplight?
Yeah.
Oh, I had no idea. I thought you were like using the end of a chapter as a stoplight. Why do I learn something every time we meet up? Okay.
No. But didn't you think the chapters were long?
Yeah.
I mean, the book is nearly 350 pages. And guys, there were only 7 chapters. And a couple of the chapters were really short. So that means the other ones were so long. But I'm not complaining.
They were long. But she was telling her sibling's life story in the chapter. And that takes a minute.
I know, but with my attention span, I need it broken up a bit. I just hate not finishing a chapter. And I'm a busy girl.
Mm-hmm.
I just can't sit down for hours on end like you and read a book. I mean, I have to take a break, and the chapters just never ended. But for me, it's like squirrels. Get distracted a lot.
That you do. But I'm just trying to kind of make sense of this. You can DNF a book.
Oh, I can DNF any book if it's bad. Ooh.
In the middle of a chapter?
No, I go to the end of the chapter.
But not bookmark a spot in a chapter. And, Amy, there were breakpoints in each chapter.
Okay, I'll give you that. There were some breaks. But why not then make it a chapter break? I mean, and no, I do not like to stop in the middle of a chapter ever. It is so untidy. I mean, I'm OCD, I think. Maybe?
I'm not qualified to diagnose that. But when you write your novel, you can make sure there are lots of short chapters.
Oh, trust me, I will. Miss, I can't DNF a book, but apparently can break in the middle of a chapter.
2 very different things.
Whatevs.
The book opens and we learn Lex's mother has passed while in prison. Lex is traveling to England as her mother has left the family home and a small amount of money to Lex and her siblings. Lex, now a lawyer, has been named the executor of her will.
Lex and her sister Evie want to use the house, and the money for something good, turn it into a community center, but they're going to need to get the agreement of each of their siblings, right? So the story goes back and forth between the past and the present, and that's where you just got to pay attention right in the beginning, and you'll get used to it as you read along. But the reader learns of the horrible abuse and neglect the children were subjected to by their parents, the starvation, confined then tied, then they were chained to the bed. They're also living in absolute filth. I mean, rot. And then their own bodily excretions, as their parents grew ever more absent. The parents are there, they're there in the house. But the children are, they're kind of like caged animals, abandoned, even though mom and dad are physically there.
Yeah. She really tells you, I mean, it's gruesome, but she kind of tells you the downward spiral, of what happens.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't always like that. She lets you see as it gets worse and worse and worse and worse while they were kids. As Lex goes to each sibling, they all have a reason for not agreeing to Lex's plan for the money and the house. And we see, through Lex's eyes, each of the sibling relationships during their time in the house and now the relationships at present day.
Right.
And readers will likely recognize this storyline from headlines like the Fred and Rosemary West case and the Turpin family, the Real House of Horrors, which Ms. Dean says she drew inspiration from for her story.
Dean, though, wanted to take a look at how these events in childhood would impact children as they grow and attempt to make their life in a world and the damage and trauma that they still live with. the struggle that they have even with each other, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that in a nutshell is this book.
Yes, it's so hard to summarize without giving away so many things.
Oh, I just got to read it.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. And Lexs has lived with the stigma as the one who escaped, kind of the one who saved them, which is an identity she does not like, but also makes her question her other siblings, wondering why didn't they try to escape?
Right. And the book tries to answer that as well. Look, it's just a really twisty book. And I think talking, maybe a bit about the structure of the story might help us here.
Maybe so, because what we have here is a kind of frame story or frame narrative.
Right.
Or when we kind of stumbled on that, which is a story set within a story told by the main characters. Okay? So in this case, Girl A is told by Lexs. This story contains other stories, that of the different siblings and Lex's observed experiences in the house, and then later out of the house. And the frame story explains why those interior stories are being told.
Well, let me give a quick example that I think might help our listeners, something that, that they're familiar with.
Yeah, I think
like the story of Titanic. Okay, Rose, main character in the Titanic, as an elderly woman, she shares with those watching the movie about her travels on the Titanic. I mean, when we finally get into the story, we are there with her on that Titanic when she's a young lady.
Mm-hmm.
We travel her journey with her until we see what happens in the end, or how it happened, or what led up to it.
Great example.
And that's a frame story.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was the example that I found that kind of resonated it best for me.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of like what you said, the inner story is their time leading up to and being in the House of Horrors. And then the outer, the frame story is after their escape from the house and up to the present.
Mm-hmm.
Lexs is telling her audience, us the reader, the details.
Mm-hmm.
Those inner stories that hold up that frame story.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yes, that makes sense.
So in Girl A, adult Lexs. So that's where you're kind of having to pay attention to go back and forth. So
right.
You have adult Lexs. She starts us off with the prison visit, like Wendy had mentioned earlier, after her mother's death. And then we're just immediately plunged into the story.
Mm-hmm.
The inner story of young Lexs and her siblings, life in the house. I mean, it gives us context to the outer story, where Lexs and her adult siblings are living and what they are doing now in the present. We are weaved back and forth and see the progression of the horror of the novel, which, it helps us, it helps keep us in the frame of the story throughout. We are outside with adult Lexs looking in.
We really are. It's such a great literary technique. And while it's through the lens, an unreliable lens at times.
Oh, I agree.
Of Lexs, we are given some perspective into the other characters in the story. We do get a lot of information from her. Lots of feels, thoughts, actions, and those all give us insight into the other characters.
Yes, exactly. I just think all this would make this novel such a great movie.
A very disturbing movie.
Well, yeah, it's a disturbing book.
I agree, it would. But I have to say, I'm just not a big movie person. I'd rather read a book. But I can totally get into some reality TV. The trashier, the better.
This would not make for good reality TV. I mean, that would be extremely disturbing, Wendy.
It would. And for the record, I was not even thinking that.
I'm just making sure.
Okay.
Let's talk themes before we digress any farther.
I think that's a very good idea with us. Now, we really had a lot of powerful themes in this novel, didn't we?
We did.
Manipulation, forgiveness, maybe even revenge, I was thinking.
Well, and you don't want to forget about escape. I mean, they got out and can't seem to run from their past.
Yeah, that is a good one. Belief or blind faith, and not necessarily from a religious aspect.
Another good one.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Kind of makes me think that there was, or they had faith, things would get better.
Yeah.
That one of the other siblings, maybe Ethan, who wasn't bound and confined, might help them to get out.
Or even their mother.
Right.
Remember when Lexs is telling her, begging her to do something, tell someone when she was out getting groceries.
Groceries, they don't get to eat. But I think Lexs knows deep down Mom isn't going to do anything.
I think so. Anyway, all great things to discuss. But you and I, we kept coming back to memory And the word remember.
Yes, the power of memory and the power to remember.
So we had to word nerd it, of course. We haven't done that much this season.
No, we haven't.
And memory or memories showed up 17 times, and memorial was once, and then memorabilia was twice.
Oh, I totally forgot about the memorabilia. I think that's kind of disgusting. That people wanted a piece of their awful past.
Yeah. I think it was only Gabriel who sold stuff, though, right?
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
To pay for alcohol and possibly drugs.
You're right. And then to the power of memory and remember. Don't you think it's a bit of opposition right there with Gabriel?
What do you mean?
Well, he's hanging on to the physical things from the house. Things at the very, very least bring up memories of that time, but then gets pretty much wasted every night to forget. To not remember.
Yeah. Wow. It did feel like all of them were trying to forget, except for Lexs and Evie. And the story is what Lexs remembers, her memory of that time.
And going back to your mention of blind faith, it just triggered something. Lexs has faith in her memories, right?
Yeah.
But memory has the power to hide or shed light on things. As you get further into the book, you learn Lexs is choosing what to remember.
And possibly even how she remembers it,
Oh, yeah.
Remember. That word also showed up a lot.
Oh, yes, it did. I think you said like 70-some, maybe 76 times.
Yeah, when I searched for it in the book, yeah.
And then you also said misremember once, which I found very interesting because Lexs does misremember some things.
Some.
And it just kind of makes you wonder about the others. What do they remember? What are their memories?
I know. Now, Ms. Dean opened more questions for the reader, didn't she?
Oh, she did.
But we do know Lexs thinks Noah, the youngest, right?
Yes.
The youngest boy.
Yeah, he was the youngest.
Yep. Got off the easiest because he won't remember.
Right, because he was just an infant. And even part of his adoption agreement is that the older siblings will not have any contact with him.
Well, they might stir up a memory for him. And really, what or who would even benefit from that, right?
Maybe,
I get Lexs really wanted to see him. And, I think to see if one of them actually made it out okay. And he is still family, of course. They only had each other.
And then what about Ethan? He would have had the most memories being the oldest.
Yes. But from Lex's point of view, he was free to roam the house, was in fairly decent condition when they were rescued, and didn't seem to have taken nearly as much abuse as the rest. Not that he and his father had any great relationship. I think that's clear, right?
Right.
But he wasn't chained up.
No, but I do think he was under enough control that he obviously, he didn't feel like he could do anything to help. And I think, his constant striving for success, is his way of running from his memories. He does have control over that, though.
Yes, he does. But the power of his memories are also pulling at him in other ways.
How so?
Well, remember how when Lexs goes to see him, he comments on her darker hair.
Oh, okay.
He says,
I see where you're going with this.
It's even darker. She tells him a couple things. One, it's not in her financial interests. How, to keep the white blonde hair they all have. And two, she doesn't want to look in the mirror and see their mother.
That's right. I remember that. Ethan gives talks on overcoming personal trauma, right?
Mm-hmm.
Him looking the part of a Gracie, it just kind of helps the audience remember him. It makes him memorable.
Exactly. And Lexs just wants to disappear. She does not like the attachment of the hair, the name, the girl A, any of it.
No, she didn't.
Now, the other thing Ethan is on board with is her and Evie's idea of a community place. He's not opposed to that, right? But he wants to put their name on it. Call it the Gracie Community Center. He wants to be remembered.
Okay, but I think he maybe kind of wants to erase their horrible past with something good. Or have his story told.
He's telling a story.
Well, maybe there's another story or a more complete story.
I'm sure there is. But I don't think Ethan put up with the horrors that Lexs did.
No, and I do think he was in some denial. But I did find it interesting when Ethan told Lexs, later in life, that it was time to stop making things up. Was that Lex's way of telling us she was an unreliable narrator? That we, the reader, can't trust her telling of the story? her memories, her rememberings?
That was a little clue, right?
Maybe.
And I do think he was in denial as well. I mean, we do only have Lex's side.
Right.
But even if there is another story, which is what? Their parents weren't that bad. They only chained 2 of their kids and beat only a couple others very terribly. I mean, it's not going to be a good one. It's not going to exonerate the parents.
Right. But maybe Ethan wants to show that good can come from bad. That's just really all I'm trying to say. I mean, there's always more stories.
Right.
I mean, when you have a narrator that's telling a story, we never get to see anyone else's
Right.
side. And I'm not dismissing Ethan and his actions. I just don't think he was very likable or really a very sympathetic character. And I'm just going to leave it at that.
I suppose that's an idea. Good from bad. I just think putting the name Gracie on it will nearly always make people remember the very part of their past they'd like to forget.
Well, that's human nature, though. But memory is tricky. Remember what Dr. K, Lex's psychologist, told her? I have a quote that really summed up so much of this story. At least it did for me. Let's see here. Your memory won't always help you. You see, it protects you from the things you don't want to think about. It can soften certain scenes or bury them away for a long, long time. A shield of sorts.
That's such a revealing statement once you finish the book.
Oh, exactly. I mean, and this is exactly why I reread novels. I love late revelations.
I'm so glad you do. I just can't. There's only a handful of books I've ever reread. But it is definitely in her present-day interactions with her siblings, the power of their memories and rememberings, filling in some of the missing pieces for her that I think Lex might, maybe start to heal now. Maybe.
Maybe. And I hope she can.
Mm-hmm.
Lex herself admits that there's a part of her life she doesn't remember.
Right.
You know how I love quotes.
Mm-hmm.
And this book was full of them.
Yes.
But this one is about her time at the hospital. Remember, she says, I remember very little about that time, and each of the memories seems exaggerated, as if I've taken somebody else's story and imagined myself into the narrative.
Ooh, that is interesting and telling, right?
I mean, this book was full. I could have quoted the whole way through. It was just so good.
Just read the book,
Right.
Get all the quotes, yeah. But if, as Dr. Case says, your memory protects you in a sense, that time immediately after the escape, when she was likely getting poked and prodded and reminded of where she just came from, and of course her and Evie have been separated, so maybe she didn't want to remember like that time.
Well, think of how much information she was getting at the time. And she lost more than Evie. She lost the rest of her siblings. Not to mention that she was, one of the last ones to be adopted.
I think she was the
It's
last
just
one.
horrible.
Yeah.
And remember, their aunt was willing to take Ethan, but not Lex. She must have felt so rejected by her family. I mean, the family she risked her life to save them.
Yeah, those are all good points. And, as the story unfolds, we do see the hold her memories have on her, or the way she's remembered things, the way they've impacted her life.
Well, even around the escape, she remembers Ethan being free. And why didn't he help? She remembers Gabriel and Delilah being able to leave their room. Why didn't they help? Even her own thoughts around it. It's just upsetting. But one more quote, if I may.
Quote away.
I earmarked this one.
And you're able to find it because the book looks like an earmark. All the tabs you have sticking out of it. How are you?
I've got to take a picture of that thing and show our listeners.
Guys, I think
Instagram.
she earmarked the entire book. Wait till you see it. But please.
Anyways.
Which particular earmark are we going to hear about?
Okay, so I'm going to go back to that quote. Let me see. Let me find it here in my notes.
Good luck.
I have spent many nights combing through the memories, like a student in a library, wiping the dust from old volumes and checking each shelf, searching for the moment when I should have known. Ah, there. It was time to act. Really.
I know. I'm just sort of shocked because it's not even like you have a color system that you found it. But anyways, on from your earmarked book. But, people at that time, they just kept asking her why she didn't just leave when she had a chance. So she's asking herself the same question everyone's asking her, right?
And it's because, just using Lex's own words, which she says is the truth.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't so bad. Maybe it wasn't. Or maybe her memory is just protecting her. Maybe.
Yeah, it does make you wonder. And talk about memory protecting you. We've got to talk about Evie, right?
Okay, yeah.
Her little sister, her bedroom cellmate, her confidant, her best friend. Remember, she was her caretaker too, even in the beginning, right?
She was, right. And while we see her physical interactions with her siblings in the present day, she and Evie have been separated since the escape, only communicating through phone calls. But always in her rememberings, she comes back to her and Evie.
And as you read, everyone is so concerned with her talking to Evie. It's their first question. Her adopted dad, Ethan, Delilah, they want to know if she's been talking to Evie again. I kept waiting for the moment they would finally meet up.
And they do. They make the trip back to the House of Horrors, to make the final steps in the process to turn it into the community center. Okay, guys, last warning. Huge spoiler coming. Present day, when Evie, who has been feeling ill, disappears from their hotel room, Lex is sure she's gone back to the house.
So in the middle of the night, in the rain or the mist, I mean, it was an awful night to be out in, really.
But weather in a story.
Of course, it's perfect. Lex sets off on foot to the house to get Evie.
Right. I mean, she's going back to save her. It's what Lex promised her when she jumped out of the window, so many years ago. With her memory virtually blank after the escape, her not knowing how Evie got out, this is her chance to finally make good on her promise.
You are so right.
Right?
But when Lex finally gets to the room, Evie says, oh my goodness, do you really think I ever left this room? Were you not just crushed by that?
Crushed. And this is really where Lex's memory, her rememberings come into question for the entire story. As we learn, Evie did not make it out of the room. Lex was not able to rescue her like she had promised. And I think her memory, the power of her memory has been protecting her from reality.
I have chills right now.
I know, I do too. I mean, she doesn't have her Evie, and she's probably blamed herself all along.
For sure.
So her choice has been just to not remember.
The weight she's been carrying. I mean, it's unfathomable.
Oh, so much more we could talk about with the power of memory and remembering. Just thinking briefly of Delilah. I want to say this before we move on, but she seems angry and frustrated with Lex and how she remembers things.
Oh, there's definitely some tension between the two of them. I mean, we have Delilah, the pretty one, the apple of her father's eye.
Right.
I found it very interesting what she said to Lex when they first met up. I don't know if you remember. Delilah asks if Lex remembers what she said to her and says, I bet you can't even remember that. You know the scene? Remember what Lex yells at her? Do you remember?
Yes, I
mean,
do.
It was horrible. Why did you get to survive?
Right.
You should have died in there. Lex's memory is questioned by her family.
And of course it is. Of course it is. I mean, they know she's not accepted Evie's death. But I felt, like Delilah and Lex, they came to an understanding at Ethan's wedding.
Yeah, I do too. It was a sweet moment, right?
Yeah.
And as the stories came together, I felt the most for Gabriel, right? The way he was treated by his parents, his siblings, and even his adopted parents.
Right, that's right. I mean, he was like their show thing at parties.
Disgusting.
I mean, they even wanted to get him some kind of a TV show, right?
Yeah.
Capitalizing on his fame, so to speak. It was just no wonder he ended up in rehab. I mean, it was just, poor guy.
I mean, he really did not want to remember, but it was powerful. He couldn't seem to escape it, and no one around him would seem to even let him.
So well said. So well said. I think we need to move on to symbols.
I feel like, and I just
I've got chills right now.
I know.
There's so much more we could talk about in this, rememberings and memory.
I just feel like it was a bit all over the place.
Oh, so understandable, though. I mean, Lex is a bit all over the place, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so how could it not be in the book?
That's true. Good
Dean,
point.
just amazing
I
the way
know.
she was able to pull that off. I mean, we're just kind of following Lex's lead. Maybe that's what Dean wanted us to do in the story.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll try to get ourselves back together, not so flustered.
I've got chills.
Same. Okay, symbols. So when we thought of symbols, there was 3 that we finally settled on that really stood out to us.
Because there were more than 3.
We just need to...
Scrolls.
Exactly. So for us, the house, right?
Right.
The chains and the bindings.
Right. We combined those.
Yep. And then the books Lex and Evie had hidden under their mattress.
Right.
Right.
So let's start with the house, which, the story really centers around.
Right. You could have called it the house.
Right. The House of Horrors.
Right.
Lex goes back to it in her rememberings, and she's physically going back to it in the present day.
I found it interesting how often the word house appeared and how seldom the word home appeared. I don't know if you picked up on that, because it's easy to think of those 2 things as interchangeable, but they kind of aren't.
No, I mean, when I think of the word house, it's just more of a building, 4 walls, a roof, a place to reside. Not much more, than shelter from the elements in a sense. So I've lived in a lot of houses in my military spouse life.
Yep.
But when I think of the word home, I mean, it's much more nuanced. I mean, it's a place of comfort, a place of feelings, love, family.
Yes, totally agree. And the house, when Lex was younger, she actually did call it home before things got really bad.
Oh, yeah, she did.
And she calls her adoptive parents' house home, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you do feel the difference in the novel between the 2. And actually, home is only referred to in the very early part of her life and the latter part of her life.
Oh, I did not pick up on that.
Yeah.
But, when Lex is younger, I mean, she's still visiting friends. I recall her going to birthday parties, sleepovers. We kind of see she has a sense of home. And that was early on in the book, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And she's aware that her house is not home, or at least it's getting farther away from what a home is.
Yes. And the language of the novel, it also changes with that. It's subtle, but you can still feel it.
Thinking back, I can see that even more after you mention that. But when we talk about the symbology of a house or home, both symbolize a private place in a world of public places. And the Gracie family was able to hide a lot from the world, in their private place.
Right.
We learned that from the reactions of their neighbors, of their friends and family when Lex escapes. I mean, people didn't know.
No. I mean, you can obviously hide a lot behind some house walls.
And they did. So we talked about a house symbolizing an enclosed, protected place. I mean, it's kind of similar to a mother's womb.
Very interesting.
I know. But, a home is more of an idea. A place of nostalgia.
Yeah.
You know that saying, a house is not a home?
Yes, I think I've used it with places we lived on a move or 2.
Yeah, I feel you on that. If we think of a home as an idea, this place of nostalgia, then a house is just an expression of that idea.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So the Gracie kids had an idea of home from their friends, and they tried, some more successfully than others, to cultivate that idea of home after their escape.
Yeah. I mean, when I think of nostalgia, it's like a pleasant thing, right? Lex does kind of allude to the fact that it wasn't always bad. Right? There were some moments in their first house that made it a home. Their first one.
Right. Agree. But the second place, the House of Horrors, which was initially called a family home. I don't know if you picked up on that, but then later resold as a family home, was anything but a home.
I mean, even Lex doesn't want to make it a home, right?
Right.
I mean, a community center, while a great place that will help others and be a place of support, it won't necessarily be a home.
No, but at least it won't exploit the place. Like I kind of felt Ethan wanted to do with, slapping their name all over it.
I think he wants to be remembered as a survivor. I mean, you kind of alluded to that too earlier.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to go on to the chains.
Okay.
Because I know you were very interested in this too. And it's an interesting symbol because while they obviously symbolize bondage, imprisonment, and slavery, They also symbolize a bond between people, connection, love, and eternity.
I also found that people who are chained together have a shared destiny. Lex and Evie were bound together in their room. I mean, those chains were what bonded the memory of their togetherness in that room. Lex's last vision of Evie before she escapes is of Evie still in those chains.
And it's a vision she fights the whole book to not re-see.
Oh, exactly. The sisters were obviously close, but the bindings and chains and imprisonment forced them together, and maybe this was why Lex couldn't move on after the loss of Evie. They are still bound together.
They are connected through their shared misery. And I'm not comparing the two, but you did kind of make me think of the girls in Beyond the Point, their shared misery of West Point.
Oh, yeah. Obviously, this is so much worse.
Obviously.
When the chains, though, were described so clearly as those used for hanging baskets or like to chain up a dog, I just couldn't unsee these two girls. Ugh.
Mm-hmm.
I just really struggled with the thought of these two young girls chained up in their room.
And in a sense, I mean, like you said, she's still there. Lex is still there, right?
Oh, yeah. And to go back to the power of memory, she's still bound to those memories. Well, they all are in some way.
And I mean, how do you escape that? Honestly.
Right. You can't. You just can't.
Yeah. Our girls did have a couple things that gave them a bit of an escape, though, while they were imprisoned in their room.
Escape. I mean, it keeps popping up.
I know. We could talk about everything, though.
I know. But there are 3 books. An atlas, an illustrated dictionary, and the gift from Lex's teacher, that beautiful hardcover book with the golden pages of illustrated Greek myths. I mean, couldn't you just picture the book?
Yes.
The way she described it?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not even a fan of Greek myths, and I wanted that book.
I know. I mean, it was such a lovely gift. And Lex even thinks it's the nicest thing she's ever owned.
And the way she opened it,
Oh, I
too.
know. And the pages fell. Oh,
right.
It was exquisite.
She had to hide it under the mattress.
Oh, of course.
Because her father would never allow such a book in the house.
Mm-mm.
But books symbolize like knowledge, escape. And these 2 books, the Atlas and the Myths, were definitely an escape for the girls. Lex would, she would read to Evie at night. I mean, quietly, so they wouldn't get caught.
Right, of course. And then they would track the heroes' routes on the atlas and dream of where they would go when they got out. Greece being their number 1 place.
I think those books gave them hope, though, that they would get out and have great adventures one day.
And they really needed that hope.
They did.
Just to survive, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it was also kind of sad because it was also like they were going somewhere, but only to the past. And now how do they move past it in order to survive and thrive now in the present?
Right. Now, quick thought, and back to Lex's questionable memory. I can't get out of memory.
I know. It's hard.
But remember when she tells us that she liked to exaggerate the importance of her teacher's gift to her and Evie's survival?
Yeah.
I mean, Lex really did leave a trail of clues for us that maybe we shouldn't believe everything she says.
She really kind of did, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I saw it when I reread the story. You miss so much on a first read.
I don't, because you send me scrolls. But I mean, Lex was trying to let us know, but also, you made me think of something. Maybe she knows we couldn't actually handle the real, whole truth of the House of Horrors.
Oh, I don't think I could.
I don't think I could either. But I think these particular books, speaking to their lasting legacy, an atlas and a book of Greek myths that we have even today, in a way, Lex and Evie were all but invisible in the house, but too visible outside of it. And their story doesn't disappear, just like the stories of the myths. They're not gone. They're still here.
Right. And even the community center. I mean, they could have elected to raise the place, bury it, sell the land, and walk away, but they were leaving their story of resilience to, literally be passed on.
Yeah.
I mean, I told you Ethan was on to something, but I had to kind of work my way through it.
I know, and I do see your point, yes. To be remembered in a good way, right?
Yeah, because at first I really thought he was there just exploiting.
Yes.
But I kind of worked through it.
Yeah.
With some help of a friend.
Well, I think I think with the name, you felt the exploitation, but not with his maybe intention.
Right.
Like, I think he's kind of proud of himself for where he's brought himself. And I think he should be.
Sure.
He just doesn't come across very likable, like you said, so it makes it hard.
Right.
It's good writing, right?
Yeah.
Power of the pen.
Absolutely.
Now, I did want to mention one other thing in regard to the myths, because I love myths, right?
You do.
So Lex's favorite was the Minotaur,
Mm-hmm.
the half-human, half-bull monster. It's a symbol of human arrogance, fear of the unknown, and death.
Interesting.
I thought so. And Evie's was Orpheus and Eurydice, which was a story of love and the weakness of human spirit, right? It symbolizes the power of love, and get this, you're going to love this, and how it can overcome death.
Oh my goodness. Maybe I could get into this mythology stuff.
I think you could if you had a little cutie pie asking you to read it.
Maybe. Maybe with your help. Hey, Foji.
Hey, Foji. You won't be able to say no.
I know it. But I want to add one final quote, if I may. From her lovely teacher, Miss Glade. I love that lady. She said, "Though books cannot save you from everything, I hope that you are still reading." Didn't your heart just sink?
That was such a good one.
So many quotables in this book.
So many. There were so many other things to talk about with this work.
There were.
Like her real world inspiration for it.
Cults. And she never said that this was a cult.
No, she didn't.
But, it did give off that feeling, for me at least.
Oh, me too. And there are some crazy ones out there.
Oh, there definitely are.
We talked a lot about memory and remembering, but also some form of the word forget was pretty prevalent throughout. Definitely some power in that as well. Did you notice that?
Interesting. I hadn't picked up on that word, but definitely it just all related.
Mm-hmm.
I just had another thought come to me.
Okay, spill.
It's not a quote.
Okay.
But remember the name of the church their father built or set up?
Lifehouse, right? Lifehouse.
Yes, Lifehouse. Don't you feel like it's such an oxymoron?
Ooh.
There was absolutely no life in that house or in that church. And even the father eventually scrapped it.
Wow. I had not thought of that, but so true. What was the first place called?
Gatehouse, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, which, it's kind of interesting as well if you think about it. Think of how like a gate, a gate keeps people out, animals out or whatever, or keeps them in, right?
Yeah.
There's just so much to talk about. We can continue on after the podcast. But don't you think this would be like a really good book club book?
Oh, I think so. You might have to give a little warning.
Right.
Because there's some stuff in there it'd be hard for people to...
Yeah.
I think especially if you have kids.
Well, I just think you need to forewarn everybody because it's not a book for everybody. But for me, I couldn't get enough of it.
I know. The discussion.
Yeah.
We could go on and on. We won't. We've got to draw the line somewhere.
We do.
And I know you love this book, but it did kind of have to grow on you a bit, remember?
It did. But I definitely, I'm getting into these psychological thrillers.
I've been trying to tell you.
I know. Maybe we should just do a season of thrillers.
Oh, I'd be so up for that.
We do have a part of our audience that loves thrillers.
Yes, I just don't want to have to drink scary Prosecco.
Oh, I can't make any promises on that. So, what are your thoughts on this Benvolio Prosecco? We're almost out.
We are.
I think I probably drank more than you. I've refilled twice.
It's a bit plain for me, but there is a sweeter finish to it. I'm trying to figure out if it's honey. It's not necessarily honey. We've had some in the past that are really honey, but there is a sweetness. What about you?
Prosecco swillability.
Seriously?
Yeah. There's a little sweetness to it. I wasn't really getting much of that until halfway through because of the nothingness in the beginning. But I'm really getting your sweetness. But when I'm really getting it is when I burp or belch.
Which you have thankfully kept quiet and to yourself.
Well, sort of. You can say that because I'm going to edit them all out. But, this Benvolio, I'm actually going to have to give it a 4.0.
What?
I like it. And I think I'd probably pair it with like a melted brie in a crust. Thinking of, I've got this jalapeno raspberry jam and probably with a baguette. Oh, it just would be so good.
Yum. You know, it also would go really good with your baked brie and huckleberry jam. But I have to backtrack. A 4.0? What? Oh my gosh.
This is a very swillable Prosecco. I mean, I think it drinks very elegantly.
Oh my goodness.
Sort of like a black tie affair Prosecco.
With you burping and swilling in the background. It sounds very black tie.
Just keeping it from getting formally stuffy.
Yes, you are. Sometimes I don't even know what to say, do you know? I can only give it a 3.7. It's swillable. It just wasn't my favorite. I actually really like that. You're kind of a genius. I'm not doing that, but it just wasn't my favorite. It's swillable, but it's not my favorite.
The story of our season.
Yep, think so. But Power Trip has come to an end.
And so has our run of subpar Proseccos, I hope.
But you just rated this one very high.
This one, but you didn't. So
Anyway, we don't need any other information. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us this season.
Horns.
As we went on a power trip through Prose.
If you enjoyed it, or even if you didn't, and you've got some tips for us, we'd love to have you rate and review us on Apple Podcast, and maybe even share the podcast with other readers.
Yes, please do. We love the feedback, and sharing is caring.
We will do a quick review of the season in our epilogue dropping in 2 weeks, where we will give out the superlatives of the season's Prosecco and Prose. See you then. Cheers. Thanks again for joining us for an episode of Prosecco and Prose. To view the complete show notes for today's episode, visit www.proseccoandprose.com and follow the link to Buzzsprout.
Please follow or subscribe.
It's free wherever you listen, and you'll be the first to know when new episodes drop.
You can even show your support by rating and leaving us a review,
which helps other lit lovers discover our show.
Feel free to connect with us on our website or any of our social media. I'm Wendy.
And I'm Amy, signing off as our bottle of bubbly is now empty.
See you for the next episode, and in the meantime,
pop a cork and read.